So, hello and welcome to episode 2 of Out of the Ordinary, profiling the extraordinary journeys of ordinary people. Well, as much as I would consider Eleanor an ordinary person who's with me tonight, who I'm interviewing tonight.
Consider me ordinary.
Well, you're very extraordinary, my dear. I've always held you in such high esteem, perhaps higher than I should, but
higher than you should. No.
Definitely. So we've just been speaking before the interview started, and I said you sound remarkably, because I had occasion to speak to your mum the other day. You sound remarkably like your mum. Now,
oh, no.
am I correct? I may have misheard. Does your mum have a maid?
A maid?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, right. No. Do you know what? Because no, exactly. I went off and said to Stevie, you know, she's got a maid. Because I'm sure you said, oh, my mum's maid. She's just and again, I must have heard your mum's mate or something like this. But I was thinking, oh, how the other half live? Because you do sound very posh, Els.
What? That would be because I was pretty much, I was raised in a middle class family, so.
Good Lord.
But times have changed. Oh, they have changed. So no, definitely no maids, and never had them.
So tell me, when you say
my mum was the maid.
When you say raised in a middle class family, where did you grow up, Els?
Oxted.
Oxted.
Which no one has ever really heard of. When someone has heard of it, I'm shocked, because it's a tiny town, just below the M25.
Okay.
Towards the M23 exit.
And
so.
what to you essentially made it middle class? I mean, the school that you went to, or the education you received, or the amount of money that your parents earned?
Yeah, just our earnings, I suppose. Being like well off to be comfortable, but never like lavish. You know, there would be treats and things and holidays and such, but. You know, and especially now that, I have next to nothing, I really appreciate like how much we actually did as a family, and so we had a swimming pool.
No, come on, that is so. In other words, if someone's looking for you via Google Earth, they just look for the house with the swimming pool.
Not anymore, no.
So what? When you say you have nothing now, what changed there? What changed in your life?
Oh God, so many things.
Give me the biggest. Give me the biggest thing. Give me the biggest thing that changed to make you, have, as you say, nothing now, from saying, as you said, appreciating what you had, and having a swimming pool and growing up in a middle class family.
Well, I mean, I would say like, I've been unemployed for a total of just over 4 years in 2 separate bursts. So I mean, I finished college and then went almost straight into work just a few months later. And I was at that job as like a journalist. I call it that because it didn't officially have any title. But yeah, and I was there for 2 years, and then I was unemployed for about 2 years.
But was that when you were working for the police?
No, that was this 2 years. No, I was unemployed for 2 years. That was shortly after becoming friends with you and having been part of the cosplay scene.
Right.
And that was when I started to kind of back off from it, because I no longer had the funds to be able to continue the hobby.
Right.
So,
well, and when you say, and obviously being unemployed is a big factor in you, obviously not having any money, but the shift from, as you said, growing up as middle class, I mean, was it, as I understand it, your parents broke up, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean,
that must have been a massive update. That must have changed status, not for you, for your mother, and for your father.
That did. That was a big factor. It's such a long story. just essentially that, you know, the way life was, especially when I was in my mid-teens, was like my mum decided that she wanted to teach English. She wanted to study. She wanted to follow her passion of literature.
A noble aspiration, my dear. How I yearn to tread the boards again.
Because essentially it was, you know, she's always loved reading, but ultimately she still is.
This was the woman who told me next time I met Johnny Depp to talk to him about how he learned about the Duke of Rochester and make sure I got some information. Yeah, no, she's very. You can tell she's very passionate about the subjects that she knows and loves.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it just became like she decided to study, and then and that led to her then having to move out because she was at Sussex University.
And
so the commute from Oxford to Brighton, you know, nearly, I don't even really remember, but like pretty much every day, right, for university. You know, that was going to be too much in petrol and things, and it was just not suitable.
Yeah, but I mean, so I mean, getting to the is that what you're saying was the catalyst for her breaking up with your dad?
Well, he split up with her.
Right.
He filed the divorce. But that was you know, after years of her having not lived with us, and you know, she'd come. You know, she would still do her hairdressing at the weekends and things, so she would still come up. Like every week we'd see her, but she wasn't by no stretch living with us at all. And you know, loneliness sort of set in, and when I was
loneliness set in for your dad, you mean, for your father?
Yeah.
Right.
And when I was at a point where, you know, I wasn't working, but I had you know, friends and support and whatnot, so he was able to do that. And then it's so hard to explain without massive depth.
I mean, I sort of get the gist. And obviously your father was working full time, so that, I mean, you had two full time.
It was like 50 hours or more a week.
Right.
It was just more. I would say it was just insane hours.
So that could afford. That afforded a swimming pool and a lovely house. And didn't you have like 3 ponies and a white tiger and a unicorn? And...
I've never been a horse person, so no. We had one dog, Rusty, dear old Rusty.
Right.
And then to, you know, while I was working, I also then got a kitten.
Right.
Who is with me actually right now.
Oh, but obviously not a kitten anymore. Obviously not a kitten anymore.
No, he must be about 5 or 6 now.
Well, yeah, okay. So where is your dad now? Where's your dad at this current moment then?
He's happily married, living in America.
Wow. Well,
yeah.
Well, that's
like I say,
Oxford.
Oxford to long story.
Right. Okay. Well, we can cut out all that, but Oxford to America is a big jump. So how did he?
Well, I mean, prior to that, he and I moved out of our family home because of the divorce. It was, you know, my mum didn't, you know, they're mutual, you know, they're friends and whatnot. But the bottom line is that, you know, she owned half the house, so
right.
When she wasn't pressuring, but when it came to it, you know, he felt right. We really need to sort of sever the tie, and sold the house, and so I moved out with him to a small, much smaller house in Western, which is, and then I met Wes, so you know.
Okay. And then you met, well, yeah, no, you're right. We're missing out a tremendous amount because all your sort of
so much.
I do. The first time I remember you was as a absolutely gorgeous young thing in. I mean, and you're still absolutely.
Oh, how times have changed.
Oh no, you're still absolutely gorgeous and everything else. But you, I mean, if you don't mind me saying, without sounding too creepy, you was a. No, hear me out. You certainly was. You certainly was a head turning entity in the cosplay world. Now, cosplay is for people who may be tuning in and have no idea. It's a sort of community, usually conventions to do. Yeah, and it's a waste of money to do with people who love fantasy and comics and sci-fi and and you go and people go to these conventions and they dress up. But what I did find in that, Els, is that it really did bring out your creative side. In as much as your designing of costumes and you as the photography aspect, the photographic aspect, and you made a lot of friends. Joey was a very good friend of yours, wasn't he? In terms of the photography and everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that just the tale of cosplay though? Yeah, no, friends that are not friends anymore.
Sorry, you cut out. I didn't hear that.
Sorry, yeah. Friends that isn't that the story of cosplay though? Friends that are not friends anymore.
Well, you're still here, and Stevie, and no, there are.
So two. two people, yeah.
Plenty of people. No, there's more than that, but it's more a matter of I'm so negative, but at the end of the day, a lot of that was about showboating and being the best and
right.
using people.
Yeah.
So,
well, it was a big popularity game, and as I said, because you were, because you were a very attractive young woman, I think. Obviously, I'm not going to. Hey, you've got white, good-looking privilege. I'm not going to play that card, but you simply had a lot of people gravitate to you, and I won't say it in no small part because you was a creative person as well. So you were creative. You were into photography and quite an adept photographer. So you made a lot of friends very quickly. Well, that was wasn't that one of your courses as well at university, photography?
No, that was college.
Right.
BTEC in college.
Oh, you got a BTEC? Wow, there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, if you need a photographer for bar mitzvahs or children's parties or weddings.
No, stop. That's why I gave up on that. I don't want to be doing that. No. Oh, no. Cosplay photography was good, though. I liked that, you'd have someone who was passionate about what it was that they were wearing. And so you'd get really interesting, dynamic pictures out of them, which you wouldn't normally get if you were working with, amateur wannabe fashion models.
Sure.
Your friends, in my case.
Yeah.
I really loved that, and that was one thing that that was why I enjoyed photographing Joey, because he was so expressive, and he was a good laugh as well. So it was.
Isn't Joey? Joey's from a really rich background, isn't he? Isn't Joey?
I saw his house and it was like a white palace, but no. I don't really know.
Right. Well, if you saw his house and it was a white palace where you weren't allowed to get close enough, then that's a pretty good indication.
No, well, I say that because his the house was just immaculate. It was white. It was really gorgeous furnishings. So clearly. Oh, I don't want to.
No.
There's only so much I'm willing to say.
No, absolutely. The only reason is because I was curious. I was curious because I think I'd seen a picture of it once, and the kitchen itself was about as big as my 2-bedroom apartment is.
I don't really remember the kitchen because honestly, I can't remember that much, which is so bad. But,
it was just booze and drugs all the way through cosplay, wasn't it? Yeah.
Sorry.
It was just booze and drugs all the way through the cosplay years, wasn't it? One big party.
It's just my absolutely shite memory. I don't remember anything.
Right.
But I do remember I went over there because I think we were working on my Catwoman mask. Like, he's the reason that there was like copper pieces on it, because he added those. But he'd made dinner thinking that if I recall correctly, thinking that I was going to be eating with him.
Thinking that you would perhaps make love.
And he had made...
No, sorry.
But he'd made dinner, and it was sausages and mash. And all I remember in the kitchen was him opening this oven, pulling out this tray of literally just mashed potato on a tray in the oven with sausages like embedded into it in the shape of a face.
Yeah, but that's in the shape of a face. Was it his face? Had he done a sort of Leonardo da Vinci sort of a montage of? Well, he was creative. You guys were creative.
It was just like this grown man made dinner. It was just sausages and mash, but it was the presentation. And if I recall, the sausages were a bit burnt. And we had a good laugh.
Pull no punches. Yeah.
Thankfully, I wasn't hungry.
But you see, your Catwoman, and your Harlequin were probably your most well known. Yeah. I mean, there was some.
And the mix of the two was also really popular, which I hated because that was born purely out of procrastination, because I hadn't finished I hadn't finished my new costume, and I had nothing, and I was feeling so down about it, and I was just like, right, I'm just gonna throw these on and see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean that's usually called.
Sad because I just put so minimal effort into that.
That's usually
awful.
That's usually called in cosplay circles. That's usually called steampunk. You throw pieces of shit together and say, yeah, I just couldn't be bothered. And
well, yeah. People are like, oh, it's a really great idea, and I'm just like, is it? I mean,
sorry, I am being really unfair to steampunk fans, but yeah, that's always the way it seems to be. Yeah, but going back, look now, very popular Catwoman, very popular Harlequin, and as I said, I mean, there were very young, adolescent boys and grown men that literally looked at those pictures and then looked at them a few hours later after they'd got their breath back, and then probably looked at them just before they went to bed. I mean, it wasn't. No, you was. I mean, you were very popular. I mean, there were lots.
You're really drumming this up.
No. There were photographers queuing up. There's that one of you in the bath. And
David, you're embarrassing me.
No. I literally just no. I remember.
No, I'm not embarrassed. But,
I
was going to say that one was more popular than anything else I put on Facebook.
Well, no, there were celibate monks who changed their religion after looking at that photograph. It started a whole trend.
I would laugh so hard. But yeah, no, do you know something funny actually regarding that picture was it did attract some unwanted attention.
I'm sure it did.
But at the end of the day, it's all I put it up there. A friend took it, I put it up there. It's kind of peer pressured into it, but still.
Yeah, peer pressure. Blame it on whatever you want. It was a fantastic picture, and anyone listening, they cost £10 from my website.
I wish. No, fucking Facebook's free, and that sucks. I could use the money right now. No.
On a slightly more serious note, but linking into this, and you were saying about unwanted attention. Now, Facebook was also a sort of hotbed of the sort of early social justice warrior movement and the sort of almost a sort of hashtag Me Too movement. Cosplayers. cosplay. No. I'm asked cosplay. Cosplay is not consent. And what were you? And I want as honest as you can give, as honest an answer as you can give. Were you, or did you ever feel threatened, or were you ever, shall we say, sexually harassed or molested at a convention or event? Did you feel unsafe, or what was it justified? All that cosplay is not consent. There are people that come up to us and
yeah, I mean there were times, but at the end of the day, you just kind of fucking brush it off and deal with it.
Right.
If you don't know who the person is, what are you gonna do about it? And that seems strange because I'm really like torn, because having worked for the police, I've heard and seen a lot of stuff that I'm like, that has reinforced the idea that, if someone has been raped, or if someone has been in any way sexually assaulted, or actually for that matter, any crime has happened to them, you should always report it, because you don't know what could happen with it. And that's one of the saddest things with sexual assault victims, is that often it takes them so long to actually report anything, because they feel that there's no point, because it's my word against yours kind of situation.
Yeah.
But with cosplay, like.
But if I can just jump in there, what you said, because I think sexual assault and in particular rape, which I think is obviously one of the most heinous crimes. A lot of people put it right up there with murder, and I certainly think it should be dealt with very, very seriously, as as we deal with the most serious of crimes. But do you think that it belittled, real sexual assault, that sort of harping on always on in cosplay about how they were being sexually assaulted, when really it was just, there was a lot of, don't get me wrong, there was a lot of creepy guys and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it really depends. I can only speak for myself, and what I've seen happen, what has happened to me. Because maybe there are instances where cosplay has led to some really serious unwanted attention. But for me, not really. No. Like, at the end of the day, one instance particularly was, I was standing to take a picture with someone, and he grabbed my ass.
Blimey, yeah. That's serious. That's fairly serious.
Necessarily. But, at the time, I didn't even think. I just moved away from him and smacked his hand and walked away, and he didn't get his picture.
And what was was it? How old was he?
Oh, I don't know. To be honest, like, I really, I push these things out of my mind.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm not asking to do the severity, but was because if you've got a grown man that comes up and does that, you're looking at someone who should really grab hold of that guy and
someone who you'd think, definitely you should bloody well know better.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the case for everyone.
Absolutely, yeah.
He was like, I would say he was definitely not older than 30. He was probably more,
20s. Well, even mid-20s, you're not half baked. You should be a full person. So he should know exactly. I mean that is.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
go on.
So bad at this.
No, go on. I'm talking over you, my dear. Go on.
Yeah, I completely agree. But the bottom line was he wasn't like, it wasn't a dad and his son, for example. It was two lads.
Right.
So, but I just got on with my life.
Absolutely. But what I'm saying is,
it was horrible, because it's just like, excuse me, but.
But you were usually surrounded by people.
Manners.
You usually had a hammer with you, didn't you? When you were Harley Quinn, didn't you hit them with your hammer?
David.
Oh, damn.
Actually, do you know what? I am literally the reason that whips were banned at MCM. Literally the reason. And I'm sure Joey stopped talking to me for that reason. No.
Really?
Yeah, he gave me the whip in the first place. No.
He gave you the whip because he used to dress as Indiana Jones. So was it one of those? Yeah, exactly. You throw me the whip, I throw you the idol.
Well, no, it was kinkier than that.
Oh, I didn't realise you and Joey went that far.
I found it hilarious, so I indulged them. But you know, it was this guy in a very, very tight spandex catsuit, just sort of with his mates, came up to me and asked me to whip him with that thing, because I think I was Catwoman. Yeah, that was the last. Yeah, I was in my actual Catwoman costume that time, and you know, it was towards the end of the day, so there were less people around, but still a lot. And I didn't realise that we were like right outside the doors, so there were security guards nearby. But yeah, I took a step back, and he was like, "It's for the video."
Well, that makes it all right. Yeah, I'll make sure it's really hard then. Yeah.
No, I was like, "Are you sure?" Because it's a real leather bullwhip. It hurts. Like, I know I've hit myself with it several times when, you know, practicing moves and things, but you know, it hurts. And I think a lot of people don't realize that until they've been hit by one. But and he was like, "No, go on." And I did it, and I just did it, you know, lightly, because I'm not about to fucking bruise someone, am I?
Well, I don't know, man. If they ask.
He was like, no, do it hard, do it harder. And I was like, okay. And so I actually went for it, and he screamed. He fell on the floor.
And where can we buy this video, Elle? Where can we buy?
I wouldn't know. I made a quick exit after that.
Well, that certainly makes it. It's a shame it wasn't the same guy who smacked your ass, because that would have been poetic justice then. He smacks your ass, and you whip him to death with a bullwhip.
It seemed a bit funny, to be honest. So right. I was just like, why not? And you also, as well, you never know if it will turn up on YouTube or something. And, you know, at that time, I was like, I'll be in any video, because it's just fun to then look back on. But yeah, no, I never did see that one.
And you say Joey didn't speak to you after that?
Sorry?
And you said Joey didn't speak to you after that? So you fell out with Joey?
No, oh God, no, don't. No, that's just me pissing about.
Oh, okay.
We just I don't know, we just haven't.
Yeah, just when you're separate
since
ways.
I stopped going to conventions. It
right.
Yeah, he didn't stop talking to me because of that. Obviously, I don't even think he knows that it was my fault.
Well, I just thought maybe he was there thinking, oh God, why doesn't she whip me like that? You know, I'm never going to speak to her again.
I highly doubt that.
Just to clear it up, was there anything that ever happened between you and Joey, or?
God, no.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We were just really good friends.
No, that's always the way it seemed to me. That's always the way it seemed.
And I never got the impression that he ever wanted more than that anyway.
Well, he probably wouldn't have said no, you know. I mean, who in their right mind wouldn't else? I mean, there's
Well, hang on, say no to Joey.
Yeah. I mean, in
fairness, he's a good-looking guy, but you know, at the end of the day, I had just come out of a relationship with the guy who refused to come to conventions with me, so I was kind of I just wanted to be on my own for a bit,
right?
Because I've had a really long history of dating, not lots of people.
Right.
In fact, very few people, given how long I have been dating. But it's been almost constant. And so that was the only time that I had really been alone, and I just kind of wanted to stay that way.
And Joey does seem like essentially a really nice guy. I mean, he always seemed really friendly. Sometimes a little bit impatient, but I think everyone at the conventions was a bit impatient with me, because I was sort of drunk most of the time.
I had to. Well, one thing really about Joey though, I still do admire his dedication to a costume. That man put research in, and you know, he put a lot of time and effort into weathering, and
Sure.
and all that jazz, and that was something to really like. That was something that I felt made him a really good cosplayer.
So I mean, moving on, and you was alone for a period of time, but I mean, if you don't mind me bringing up that, it was then when you felt like you was ready to date again, was really one of the most painful periods of your life, wasn't it? That caused a really real. I mean,
that's really when the shit hit the fan.
Yeah.
To be honest, with everything in my life.
Really, you can see a distinct sort of turning point from that.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Basically, don't be single. I don't know. No, it's bad luck.
Yeah. No, but I think I remember. I mean, as far as I could deduce or get from the whole thing, it was a betrayal, and obviously betrayals at any time in your life, a betrayal, especially when it's to do with friends or people that you trust, can be absolutely devastating. I mean, they really can be.
I mean, I'm not going to talk too much about it, just because you never know who this is going to get out to.
Sure. No, absolutely. And we won't even mention names.
Money was a factor, but this really was the core of the reason why I stopped going to conventions and why I really retracted into myself. And it was really, in some ways, I appreciate it, because you really learn stuff from you really learn like who your friends are.
Sure.
And there were 95% of the people that I was friends with stopped talking to me after I stopped going to conventions, and no one asked me if I was all right.
Right.
No one seemed to think that it was strange that someone who was incredibly passionate about cosplay suddenly just dropped off.
Right.
And that as well, that along with the betrayal itself, really, really was a hit. And I'm still so thankful that I have a loving family, and Wes was just a shining light at that point. Right. He really was really something that saved me.
And Wes is your current boyfriend?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's yeah. Well, that's lovely. That's lovely that it does have a sort of a redemptive. The story does have a redemptive quality. You're not now, you're not a drug addict that lives in a hostel now.
Never
without any, without anything. No, it's important. It's friendship, relationships. As John Donne says, no man is an island. Sorry, that's really politically incorrect, isn't it? No human is an island.
Women are just the raft. Coconuts.
Ask not for whom the bell tolls; it tolls for thee. Yeah, no, absolutely. But so going back to your creativity, and you did have a big passion. You did have a big passion for conventions and cosplay and the photography and the costumes and everything that was involved. What would you? I mean, you said you've been unemployed now for quite a while. What would you say would be your perfect job, Elle?
Oh God, do you know what? I probably could have answered that like a year or two ago, but
and what would the answer have been then?
But now I'm so I have a really strange so there's so many people, especially when you're young, like a teenager, you're having all these things thrown at you saying you need to decide what you want to be, you need to decide who you are so that you can continue in life and pick the right path. And I was always absolutely fine with that. I never had any problems with what I wanted to do, my direction, my passions, or who I was. And that's something that has started for the past year. Maybe a little bit longer.
Don't keep us in suspense. Don't keep us in suspense. What was that thing? What was that thing?
What do you mean?
Well, you just said you didn't have any problem with the direction, and you knew what you wanted to be.
Yeah.
And what was that thing?
Oh, well, at the time, I wanted to be a photographer. I wanted to be a fashion photographer.
Okay.
And that was why I then went to college and did photography.
Okay.
Did cosplay. Well, I mean, the whole reason I even got into cosplay was messaging a friend who I knew who did it, because I was looking for girls who had Disney princess costumes and would be willing to do photo shoots.
Right.
And then from there, I ended up kind of forgot about that and ended up getting into it myself. But yeah, no, and
the world is a better place for you getting into that into it, Elle, may I say. I mean, I know.
Yes, I know. You look back and think,
I just wish you'd have befriended me. You always just. I mean, I know.
What about?
Well, no, it took me a long time. It took me a long time to befriend this radiant, the rare and radiant maiden who the angels name Lenore or Eleanor.
What? That's not. No, I remember seeing you at the very first convention that I ever went to.
Exactly, and you ignored me completely. And then I tried.
I was terrified of you. I was not the person that I am now. I have to say, I do owe a lot of my confidence to cosplay. You know, because it doesn't force you, because some people don't. But it forced me out of my comfort zones, and I'm much better at talking to people now than I was prior to that.
No, well, that's a good thing.
So yeah, and that really helped with like doing with the photography. That really helped, because you know I could then sort of try and get the best out of someone when they're in front of the camera, because you know I've never worked with anyone professional, so it was always a matter of drawing it out of someone and you know, instilling sort of, I suppose, confidence into them.
Sure, yeah. I think that's obviously a very important role that the photographer plays, is to instill a bit of confidence
and make them
in the
feel
subject.
comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's half the fight, really. So you know, cosplay did some good and some really.
But what you're saying now is that is a dream that's died. You no longer pursue or entertain that dream.
And that's kind of out the window. I mean, this is the thing. I'm now struggling with like what I want to do and who I am, because to some extent I've sort of become a bit of a sort of a jack of all trades and master of none, and that really bothers me, because I just want to have like a you know, because I've always had sort of a set path.
You want a speciality,
So I mean, because you know, in this 2 years of unemployment, you know, my dad pushed me to kind of, you know, try and do a course, try and maybe take a different direction, and so that's what I did. A year ago, I was studying sewing, which was born from cosplay, because I decided I loved making so much that I wanted to actually make and actually have it be good and good quality.
Sure.
And then potentially, you know, make for other people. But that's also died now. But you know, it's kind of.
So what are you saying? What are you saying? What are you saying? It sounds to me as if you actually miss cosplay, and that could revitalise a lot of what you used to love doing. No,
not really.
No.
No, because I realise now how shallow most of the people are that do it. I mean, the fact that I've only really got a handful. Less than a handful of solid friends from those 2 years that was spent cosplaying. Now, when I really need people,
but
only a handful of people are there out of the hundreds of friends that I made.
Yeah,
which is really telling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But isn't that the way? I think surely that's the way though with any endeavour that relies on that relies on attention seeking, because everyone's so fickle. Everyone's looking for for as many Facebook likes or as many Instagram followers or as many as many admirers as they can possibly get. So if you simply fall off the edge,
you're no longer relevant.
Yeah, and it's a little bit sad, because you do, as you move through life, you think to yourself, I made some good friends and
some really shit enemies. No.
Well, that as well. I think I made more. I'm 47 or however old I am. I'm immortal, my dear. I go on and on and on. And I made more, and I think enemies would be a relevant word to use, a fitting word to use, than I've made in all of my. And I've worked I've been a cleaner. I've worked at Sainsbury's. I've worked at McDonald's. I've had a stall at Camden. And I never met people so willing to
drop you in the blink of an eye.
Well, not just drop you in the blink of an eye, but hate you. But go out of their way to try and make your life more difficult.
Or accuse things.
Or accuse you of things, or misrepresent you. Or
so many people who just hate polar bears.
Yeah, polar bears too. Although you're misrepresenting me there, but you don't. That's not that your memory of the polar bear is not the right one. You were. It was only you and that other girl. No, Tom's girlfriend. The other girlfriend. What was her name? She lovely.
Girlfriend.
All right, the girl that he would have.
Girls. Not a girlfriend.
Someone that would have biblical relations with. It was only you and her on the bed when I was doing the polar bear impression.
But everyone was in the room.
No. That was earlier. There was no room for me to do the polar bear impression earlier. If you remember, because everyone was on the bed. It was only when I came. When it was just you and Tom's marine friend and what was her name? Susan, Michelle. I haven't seen her, spoken to her.
Ian was there as well.
I think he was, yeah. So
there were a lot of people in that room.
Exactly. So that wasn't
to me that girl could try and make any claims.
But that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That's not where you've got it wrong, because that's not where I did my polar bear impression. But there wasn't enough room to do a polar bear impression. If you remember, there was loads of people, and there were only single beds. If you remember, the polar bear impression I did was on a double bed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there wasn't a double bed. There was only single beds. There was only
8 people.
No. We're going to get confused, and the listeners to this are going to think we're absolutely insane.
Just cut it out.
Yeah, we'll sort this out in editing, dear. We'll sort it out in editing. But no. In my defence, you've got it wrong. Even as drunk as I was, I remember things, and I especially remember polar bear impressions. Anyway, that still doesn't excuse me for streaking up and down the corridors absolutely naked.
No, those were separate occasions.
Yeah, those were definitely separate occasions. Yeah. So.
I attribute all my current trauma to that. No, I'm kidding.
What do you mean?
I'm kidding.
You never even had the pleasure of seeing it.
It was fucking hilarious, frankly.
Anyway.
Yeah, there were some really, really good times born from being in cosplay, but yeah. I mean, the trouble is with life, especially like the negatives tend to really outweigh the positives until you actually sit and think about something.
Yeah.
Which is something I'm really struggling with at the moment, is that it's really hard to remember the good things when you're so affected by the bad. Sure.
Yeah. No. That's a very good point. I think it is much easier to let the bad things take over. Well, simply because they're impressed more on your mind, aren't they? The sort of fleeting moments of happiness sort of seem to come and go, and you sort of grab them and you enjoy them. But the human mind seems much more on, and then that happened, and that was really shit, and I'm going to remember that forever.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. This is a theory I have, is like with the intelligence that we have as a race, we have to have, we might not have a natural predator above us, but we've got our own self-destruction. So, without that, we'd be rife. Well, we already are, but I mean, it kind of culls in some degree.
Well, yeah.
With war, but then also on a personal level, people's need to, self-criticize and things. There's what is the purpose of that? There isn't really any purpose to that. But
I think you've got the opposite end of that, haven't you? You've got people who really who are self-critical, and people like myself, and probably like you as a
because I'm dreadful for it. Yeah.
Sorry, who are almost crippled sometimes by their self-doubt. And then you've got these other people, for instance, the people that you see on perhaps X Factor, who are so self-deluded by their talent that they think they're just, they're just the best thing. And I think there was a lot of people like that, going back to cosplay as well. There was a lot of self-deluded people in that sphere as well.
Yeah, in that case, I think it's a lot. There's a lot of narcissism, and it's only since cosplay that I've really sort of educated myself on narcissists, because it's not always what people think it is. At the end of the day, it's really quite dangerous from an emotional standpoint of not being a narcissist, being around people who are, and not knowing what kind of traits that they have.
Oh, you mean the sort of the clinical definition of narcissism?
Yeah, I mean,
because that usually goes along with sort of sociopathy, the sociopath.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think things like cosplay activities that, as you say, that certainly have become very much a popularity contest. It really, really attracts those kinds of personalities.
Right.
And you can go into the whole thing thinking, oh, this is great, but at the end of the day, like, you just don't know how someone's gonna treat you when it really boils down to it, because this is the thing about people in cosplay using one another. You can get really hurt by things like that, and that comes back to the betrayal, really. Is I believe that, looking back, I was dealing with a group of narcissists,
right,
and I had no idea. I just I was being I would like to think that with cosplay I was very carefree. I put a lot of time and effort into like stressing over costumes, but when it really came to like going to an event and behaving at an event,
yeah. But why was you terrified? Why was you terrified by me? Why did you avoid me? Why did you never befriend me? I was in the most need of being befriended.
I liked you before. I don't know. You're incredibly. You're very muscular, and on top of that, very loud. Like, and looking at you now, I can really see like your vulnerabilities and things. But back then, as a stranger, and me being only like 17 or 18 when I started.
Is that how old you were?
It was
Lord.
quite intimidating.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Until I think it was Lisa introduced me to you properly.
Right.
Is that correct?
Possibly. Possibly.
A girl, whoever it was, introduced me to you properly, and only then, seeing that whatever that girl had said about you in a positive manner, sort of made me realise that I was really judging the book by the cover, and you know, now obviously I sit there and I think, you know, that loudness and stuff, I think in some sense you really sort of projected that onto me, and you know, you're one of the people that really influenced the way I interact with other people now today, to some extent.
Well, that's very kind of you. Then my job here is done.
Yeah.
But funny enough, you made me before we started the interview. I remember the reason I picked your avatar as an elf, a female elf, because I remember. I do remember tasting your delicious lembas bread. And it saw me through it. It gave me succor for an entire week. For people, I said succor for people who are going to think that's a rude word.
Admittedly, I missed that as well.
for the entire weekend, and but there's quite a sinister story to your succoring, and. And
stop that.
No. All right, I'll stop with the word. But there was someone who you were staying at a hotel, and as you were baking your lovely lembas bread, they leapt out of the window above you.
No, you've got the story all wrong.
Oh, sorry. What happened?
Oh no. Can I just quickly though interject the lovely lembas bread that everyone absolutely loved? That was the worst cake I have ever baked in my life. And I knew it at the time, and I felt like I was scamming people. This is shite. And
so you scammed me then? So you basically you scammed me.
This is great. I don't know if it was just people humouring me or being nice, but
well, when you've got a beautiful lady selling you bread, yeah. If you have, I think it was your manner and your beauty that sold it. Probably it just goes to show you don't have to have a good product. You don't have to have a good product.
100 cakes.
You don't have to have a good product. All you need is a beautiful woman, and you can literally sell anything. I think that's what that proves.
Extra flattered because I'd forgotten all my makeup in my rush to make 200 cakes and get to a convention without them being stale or anything. I had completely forgotten to pack any makeup, which is
that's all right.
Cosplay, but no.
So yeah, tell me the story. What happened?
Suicide.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay, so staying in a hostel with the boyfriend at the time.
Who was the boyfriend at the time?
We're sat on a bed, discussing what we're gonna have to eat that night.
Lembas bread.
No, thank you. No, I sold all of that.
Right. Okay.
No, and just deciding what to eat, and there was just this really loud crash. Kind of like the only thing I can really liken it to is when you might hear the bin men taking the rubbish, and you hear that massive clunk as the van like tips. I don't know what it does. Tips the rubbish in. Crunches it up or whatever.
Sure. Okay.
That specifically that noise. And we thought nothing of it because it was London, so you could hear anything loud and think nothing of it. And then there was a lot of talking, a lot of voices, and we kind of just looked out the window. And saw other people looking out their windows fully and on their balconies and all looking in the same direction. And we didn't really care. We were hungry, so we were gonna just leave the room, go and find something to eat. And we realised walking out, there was blood splattered all up the wall of the hostel. It was really, really grim. And this man had jumped from the floor balcony above us and had almost very nearly impaled himself on the iron railings that were running around the outside of the building. Like an inch closer, and that would have been an even more gruesome sight. but yeah, that was pretty crazy, because I've never seen anything like that, and especially at that time, this was before I started working for the police and had heard all number of nasty things, and I was just completely shocked. It was crazy, and and we just went off and had our dinner.
Yep, that's
horrible.
That's good. Yeah.
Collected our Subway and went back to the hospital. We decided against pizza though after that.
Yeah. There was enough on the pavement.
Sauce, but yeah, it was nasty. And the thing as well was he died as well. He was alive for. They had an ambulance and police cars and all these people and a tent put up around him for hours. It was like, I would say it was at least 3 hours.
And all you did was just eat a Subway and just forget about him. I mean, come on.
No, didn't forget about it. I mean,
you should have offered him some. You should have offered him some Lembas bread. I
mean, he wasn't. I don't know. This is what my mum likes to refer to as pavement pancake, which is quite accurate. Unfortunately.
No, it's. I mean,
disgusting.
It's we've discussed.
Really sad.
As you probably, if you've listened to the first interview, we discussed suicide on there, and you've got everything. Hopefully, as I progress with these interviews, everything's up for. You've got to laugh at absolutely everything. I mean, the whole thing about.
It's the only way to get through things.
Well, I think to a certain extent, it is a coping mechanism, isn't it? Humour, laughter. Of course, you've got to give respect to. You've got to give respect where it's due, and a certain amount of sobriety and a pro where it's needed. But
well, I mean, I've had a lot of experience with suicide, so I mean, I don't take it lightly when I.
Absolutely.
This man was a pavement pancake.
Absolutely, no.
It really was so shocking and sad, and
no, I remember you mentioning it. It was like a big thing there when you was at the convention the next day, how much it had affected you and stuff like that. But
that was the first time though with suicide. Anything like, I don't think my dad's brother had died. I think that was after, if I'm remembering correctly. So that was the first time, and I was just completely shocked. Yeah, especially having seen it.
So did you find was there any reason that manifested itself as to why he held himself? Because obviously he must have been in the same hospital as you.
No idea who he was. I don't know anything about that. I mean, at the end of the day, the police were all there and they were answering people's questions as best they could, but there was a lot going on. And as I was about to say, he was still, shockingly, he was still alive for like 3 hours on that pavement. And it was only after they'd eventually been able to move him into the ambulance, that he died in the ambulance. And that's essentially all we know. Yeah. And we didn't see anything on the news about it. It just goes to show how prevalent suicide really is. You only tend to hear about it if it's really shocking, or if it's a celebrity.
Yeah, sure. I think the one that affected me the most was Robin Williams. Because he was old as well. I mean, and it was like, wow, surely. Yeah. Or at least in my mind, you must have put your demons to rest by the time you're sort of in your 50s. You're midway through your 50s. You've got to put most of your demons to rest. And,
Well, there's a documentary about to come out about him. I forgot what it's called now. I saw it literally yesterday, this advert. And it's about the fact that, from what I gathered from the advert, it's that, he was struggling with depression his entire life. So it wasn't so much something necessary. I don't think it sounds like, I don't think it sounds like it was something that had really caused it, but was something that was just with him the whole time.
Right.
And in that instance, I suppose age doesn't really come into it. But no, that was really, really sad. You know, especially as he was a name that everyone, no matter who you were or what you liked, everyone had heard of him, and most people loved him in whatever they saw him in.
Yeah, so. Yeah. And everyone's got some. Yeah. He was in some shit films, but everyone, bar no one has got a fantastic memory of Robin Williams in something, you know, whether it was Mork and Mindy or the genie in Aladdin or Good Morning Vietnam or Mrs. Doubtfire. I mean, there's just an absolute plethora of things that he did, and it was just. I'm saying that. I mean, yeah, it's as you say, depression. I mean, depression can affect you at any age, and if you say he was suffering with it his whole life, it could have been an underlying factor.
I don't know that for sure, obviously, but that's what the tone of the advert kind of hinted at. So, but I mean, as well, Chester Bennington, shit.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah.
That's another one. Like, I was shocked to see that was a. But then looking back, and as someone who loved their music, and I still do, you can actually kind of see it.
Zeppelin rules.
You can really kind of catch that tone. And it just seems so sad.
Yeah. Well, on that really cheery note. Our time is up, and I hope this doesn't become. It might become a theme that we always talk about suicide on these interviews. I'll certainly. Maybe it's a fascination I have. I don't know. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you and just scratching the surface. And as I said to my last guest, I'd love to. Because obviously there's so much more to talk about, and your future aspirations, and give us an update. And I'd love to have you on for a second interview, Els. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, by all means. Like, I've got some pretty interesting, stories regarding the police station. Nothing that I could really divulge.
Yeah. Come up and see my etchings, my dear. Yes.
There's certainly some interesting, enlightening thoughts that occur after having heard and seen certain things.
Absolutely, we didn't even touch on your philosophies and your and what makes you you. This is just saying hello, basically. So I'm gonna hello. This is Els Eleanor Main. Find how the spiffing work and a absolute contribution to mankind's enrichment. So, Els, I'm going to say goodbye, and I'm going to put this up, and it's been a pleasure, and God bless you, and I'll speak to you soon, I'm sure.
Yes.